bells jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse. Jingle bells jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Jingle bells jingle all the way. What fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Crashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh. O'er the fields we go, laughing all the way. Bells on bobtail ring, making our spirits bright. What fun it is to ride and sing a sleighing song tonight.
The bird machine. Check. Check.
And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in this beautiful blue planet. Blue planet, can I even speak tonight? Another day of breath. Well, trying to make it a happy, festive greeting for everybody. The world spins in a different direction, as we've seen. Once in a 2,000-year flood ripping through Sumatra in Indonesia. Once in a 500-year flood on the tail end of those storms going through Malaysia and Thailand. I just don't know how you can get 12 feet of standing water across a portion of the country, and it's only a once in a 500-year flood. We're going to come through the winter forecast tonight. I did a video earlier today on the Adapt 2030 channel about that. What can you expect, at least for this month in the short term, and then out a little bit longer term. We have a sunspot group that looks very much like the Carrington grouping, swinging around on the Earth-facing direct side, coming in straight at us. So will it set anything off is the question, because it already released X1.2 and it was on the other limb there. So as it spins toward us, will this be the Christmas that everybody remembers? And they're already calling power outages, etc. I'll get into that tonight with a few of the news articles that we have here lined up for you this evening. Nice jacket. Well, thank you. This is a gift from a few years back. I love this one. It feels it's icing rain tonight, so I wanted to get a little warm in here. Over on buymeacoffee.com/civilization cycle. Thank you so much for hooking us up with double espressos. Gayla Denise Tregre, love your videos. Thank you very much. Julie Sunshine 333. Hey, are you Illuminati? I'm going with you. Love you once, love you twice, love you more than beans and rice. Thought I'd throw the rhyme back at you if we're getting into the Dr. Seuss. Oh, in the house without a mouse. Okay, I think you go. But the raccoon, everybody's hearing about the raccoon. Great show, guys. Love it when you get into electromagnetism. And we are going to tonight, I hope Ransom dives into the tokamak reactor, spinning into the Statue of Liberty Nebula. You know, we could take it any way we want to with energies tonight. Keep it rolling. Truth is light. And someone bought us 3. Thank you very much. Ransom, it's been an unusual week here, and we'll keep scrolling through. Someone who's left to buy U.S. Treasuries now after the Japan carry trade is finished, 2.3 trillion being sold off by Japan. China has been done. That's why I have some actual Japanese news tonight, by the way. The carry trade was when you could borrow money in like Japan for zero interest. Actually, for a minute there, they were at negative interest. They were paying you to take on Japanese debt. You just made money by buying it, and then you could use that for anything else you wanted. So you got it for 0% in Japan, and you could borrow hundreds of billions of dollars and just move them into treasuries and take that 5%. Or you could put it into Bitcoin or gold or anything along that way, real estate, anything. And now that they're like, we need our money back. And a lot of people in the banking industry are unhappy that they're no longer getting 0% interest. So we're watching a lot of shenanigans take place. There's just so many things going on here with the world. So let's get into it. Ransom, please take it over. I don't know what you got on your plate tonight, but ladies and gentlemen, please stay with us here. We're not going to be delving too much into the politics. We're going to be more on world events in terms of climate action, what's happening with the winter, what's going on with the planet, the sun itself, and how this is driving governments in this seemingly madness, push sloppy mess that they're trying to, cover over with a wet blanket onto our planet right now. Something's going on. Quite easy to see that they're in all-out panic, and it doesn't care how sloppy or reckless they are. In terms of, France coming out with its new censorship policy saying, we will tell you what the truth is. If you go outside those lines, your company will not be able to operate in France, much like they did with Rumble, but Rumble's back. So France is taking the lead to try to pressure X to say anything that we deem that's not inside this little microcosm bubble of the truth is deemed misinformation, disinformation. You have to censor it in your own countries, or else you can't operate in France. So it's back to the same swirl again. Rumble, don't know what's going on there with them, but I heard they are just back in as of this week. And I'll just zip it. So Ransom, that is you're tossing the tennis ball back on your edge of the court over there.
Man, there's all kinds of crazy stuff.
Oh,
World changing crazy things that are happening that, you wouldn't, at least when I was a young man, I did think that things like that would happen, but it's a shock to kind of see some of the things happen. We've kind of talked about where things are going, and we're finally starting to see where they're at, like in real time. And so instead of predicting the future, like I've talked a lot about AI and machines and all of that over the last 5 or 6 years about how we're transitioning into that. Now we see it in real time. And, I got a couple of articles to string together on you. And this is worldwide. So when you think about anything that I'm saying about this place where I live, this is actually literally where I live. But it's AI coming revolution hits home first at Holloman Air Force Base. And if you don't know about Holloman Air Force Base, it has a long history of being the intermediate base where things go from top secret over to the public domain to where they're known and admitted about. So I could give you a few examples. There's like the high speed test track. There's they have the laser test site out there. There's the missiles, the whole World War II and the first atomic bomb. All of these things kind of rolled out. Even the SR-71 was here at this base for a little while, and then later the other versions in the 90s of the stealth aircraft were made public, and then they had the FY-22. So over and over again, these things always come out here. We even had the first, Raptors, excuse me, not Raptors, but the Predator drone program before they were too much, making it public where it was at when we first started doing drone strikes around the world. And now we have F-16s and completely humanoid robotics, dogs, the whole plethora of things I've been talking about now, admittedly being used 6 miles from me over there. And this is also the site where they've tested programs to surveil the internet. So, I'm sure they're familiar with the locals and what they look at on the internet. Not making any accusations, but the technology is there and very possible that they could be using it at any time. So, in my area, people are used to hearing, jets go by all the way back, like I said, to the 70s. Various programs have been here. But now to know that they're robots flying over you. These are F-16s that are flying over you in formation. And I got from an inside source that they have been doing more sorties for some reason or another. He didn't have an opinion on why or what for. He just confirmed that they are flying more sorties during geomagnetic storms. For whatever purpose. I have no idea. It's something that I noticed before I got the confirmation that every time we were out there trying to look at the Northern Lights and see if it had stretched down to my neck of the woods, that they had, sorties going on a lot later at night than they usually do. Now, I thought it was one of the training programs that they have a long history of. It's training Ukrainians, Italians, the Japanese, all kinds of people, the Germans, all have been stationed here to learn how to fly our older equipment. But now we're jumping that shark. Don't worry about the pilots knowing how to fly that old equipment. They're just being retrofitted to be controlled by autonomous AI. And this is not just
Ransom,
this.
can I just interject a thought here? What if they're training for disruptive events on radar or weapon systems where that overcharge in the atmosphere, highly electrified, maybe not overcharged, wrong statement, but a highly electrified atmosphere might affect their instrumentation and navigation during those times? Because if you were a government planning for a depleting magnetic field, which I have some slides for tonight, would you not get ready for that and see how your equipment's malfunctioning? Or on the inverse, maybe it's performing even better. We just don't know. We always think, oh, it's going to degrade the performance because of, electrical interference, but perhaps there's some sort of amplified effect on it. Just throwing it out there.
I think that's probably what exactly is happening, and not just for the things flying in the atmosphere, but the robots and the artificial intelligence networks on the ground. All through the whole area there. And they're even talking about how much they're in bed with Starlink terminals that blanket the base out here. But not only that, they're working with the Optimus robots, the humanoid. And I'm sure that they have more advanced models out there with the military than you get to see on TV, the little friendly robot that they want to put in everyone's home. But let's move on to kind of what does that mean? Me and you have been talking about these maps, and you sent me the better website for the DFLOC cameras, license plate readers, facial recognition, gait recognition, all of that can be part of these terminals. And we've also talked about how they just seemingly are located near the food centers. Not only that, like places like Home Depot, where you would be able to build things, any place that's putting out substantial supplies that works for a civilization to be running. Basically in the peasant side of it, or the worker side of it, or the middle class, whatever you want to call it, for them to be able to do anything. These cameras are set up there, but then you think, how many are these? And you just start backing up, and the clusters they're everywhere. And if you go to a more populated area, it's like a complete nightmare. You see how they keep splitting into more and more cameras on every intersection at any point in the infrastructure that's deemed necessary, which makes me think a lot of the InfraGard that a lot of people forgot about, that came around after 9/11, and it was part of the Patriot Act and some of the National Defense Authorization Acts that continually get updated every couple of years or whatever it is. But they keep adding these programs, and then people forget about the programs. Well, this program specifically was about some kind of scenario where the United States would fall apart, basically, and have to have civilian counterparts to the government located in critical infrastructure, buildings, facilities, services, and other. So you might have them at the power company, you might have them at the telecommunications company, you might have them at the gas company, or, all of the police agencies and things like that. But there would be a civilian counterpart that, really thought that he was a clandestine person because they were included in this program that would report directly to Homeland Security about things. But not only that, there was part of the programs that were in future, reference at some point, maybe those people would have to defend said infrastructure from there, which puts this idea of the any scenario, what can happen. And people are always wondering, can the government track you in location, which I want to get into another subject. It's not political. I only want to cover the technological side of it, not which party did what or who's saying whatever, but can the government track your location, but usually not spying on you directly? That's okay. Well, we know they can. We're seeing it in real time. And you think about these new bases, mine being the first publicly announced, but to have these massive AI programs with things that fly around and have the same software as those flock cameras that can keep track of each object and each individual when they walk around or they drive around whatever vehicles, and tell me you're not in a top down, complete surveillance grid that was kind of, sprouted up during the COVID era just a few years ago. They got all of the little niches and spaces that were there. And then now when, kind of everything's tracked, we're moving into a lot mass layoffs. We're talking about the real state of the economies. And this is a good article just on the title alone. Cocaine inflation. Just think about the skyrocketing prices of, monetary systems and different things moving around. But the real kind of mark of inflation is what's going on. And supposedly, we're doing this one kind of war, but they've admitted as much that they're really setting up for a different kind of war, which I predicted. I even put that on our Telegram channel about how the placement really is more about China or Russia and the way that the governments are unfolding for whatever reason. And then they're just kind of poking everybody in the eye with the whole collapse of civilization. Here's this idea that they said was not happening, direct from the United Nations Population Division, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations. And what's the title of this big PDF? And I'm not going to get into it so we don't get in trouble, but just the title alone, as you can see there on screen, is an admission of what we've been talking about the movements of populations all over the place. And here, this is where
Ransom, if I could interject, I'm getting a lot of messages here that saying the Rumble feed is not live, and I'm over on Rumble. I just wanted to copy the link and then send it in through the chat. And yeah, it's not. It's just on a loop of just 10-second loop here, and
it
nothing
says
is
unable to connect on this end.
unable to connect on the stream.
Only on Rumble.
Only on Rumble. Yeah, we got 6 people waiting over there.
Everywhere else seems to be streaming. I don't know if that's a problem on that side of things or what.
Again, if you do look at some of the the different problems right now with what we see here, let me share this one. There's been, some amplified energies from the sun coming in right now, and this is the newest magnetic model right here from 2014 compared to 2025. So when you look at this and put it in context, in a little over 10 years, notice how the South Atlantic anomaly now extends all the way over, and I'm talking deep losses in the nanoteslas there on negative, which means no magnetic field, basically, all the way over to South Africa, completely across the southern reaches of the Southern Ocean there.
Yeah, the majority of South America.
Over South America. I'm sorry, Ransom, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, it's basically covered South America there.
Yeah, and look how far it's extending over to. Now, if this were to continue at this same amplification and speed, well, then within another 10 years, it should be heading more toward Australia, but they're looking into some sort of, exponential runaway effect on this. So how quickly will it reach past South Africa? move over to Australia, and then start getting further and spreading down into Antarctica itself, which means that the southern pole had moved. And what is the peninsula that you see directly below South America there, this is where the magnetic pole is moving away from. So the magnetic pole is heading toward Australia, but at the same time, it's coming off Kamchatka Peninsula in the north and heading toward Indonesia. So you start to see those two lined up there is where they're. So where that magnetic anomaly is in the Southern Ocean, it seems that the magnetic South Pole is moving in the opposite direction away. It's moving toward Australia and kind of to the, say, 2 o'clock position off of Antarctica there, heading toward Australia as this thing grows itself. So it's interesting to see how, the dance within magnetism, for a better term, there is there. So thought I would throw that out there since you were talking about disrupted electronics. Could be anything, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that they are obviously planning for all of this kind of events, and the events that we're seeing that we think are more geopolitical may have a different motivation behind a lot of them. There's what the public gets, and they have to keep feeding them the same line. World War III, they go on and on about supply chain problems, and they play off each little block, each little country off on itself, giving it division and instability problems. And it seems like they're doing that to stall for an event where they can, control all of the resources all at once, just like in a blink of an eye, basically overnight. Where they implement all of the stuff that they're building in the background, because there's just so much big distraction out there right now. Some of the silliest things. And that's kind of what I was going to go to in a minute. But I was pointing out how they're going to use this where I was going is they're going to use this technology against kind of the upper middle class and down. And it's not going to be used for anything big that you have a conspiracy about. You think you don't believe it on TV or what happened. All of a sudden the technology is all going to fail kind of at those kind of levels.
So another thing you might want to ask is, why has JP Morgan Chase moved its entire precious metals trading staff to Singapore during the Thanksgiving holiday under the sneakiness of night, for a better term? So this is another thing that's talked about, is the COMEX gold and silver, more on the silver edge, actually. There's just not enough silver. Somebody put in a delivery notice for 400 million ounces, something like $20 billion, supposedly deliverable at the end of this month, which they do not have. The cascade on the market is going to be absolutely just a economy shifting event were this to occur. And it's just interesting how a month before this would to be occurring, JP Morgan has moved its offices over. So what's going on there is really more the question. I don't know. I don't have the answer, but definitely if you want to shift into something here. So
Did I understand that right? That there's like it's not there to deliver to them, but they're still moving there?
Right. Apparently they're de-escalating their risk by having their desks over there, so there's no culpability if the COMEX implodes here. So I'll say that again. At the end of December, there's somebody that's standing for delivery for 400 million ounces of silver. $20 billion is the contract value. It's the largest contract ever in the history of anything ever traded to take physical delivery of. They do not have that amount of silver anywhere. I think they had 319 million ounces. So they were scrambling across the planet to try to get that. So once that will not be delivered, and they're saying we're going to force you to go to cash settlement, I don't even know if they have 20 billion in cash to cash settle with these people, whoever they are. It's an unknown contract behind there. So we are going to see something, very unusual here. And this is one of the reasons that you're seeing silver go up near $60 here these last couple of days, is because people understand if this does not get delivered, at that point, there will be no pricing structure any longer. It will be whoever has it can ask whatever they want for it, because there will be no more mechanism to deliver onto this market. And literally the paper, everything that in precious metals will be whoever has it in hand pretty much writes the rules at that point. This will cascade the bond market, and in turn will cascade the stock market. But again, Ransom and I have been saying that they're looking for an event or going to create and cause an event to get us to the switchover of the economy into this digital system. Well, we can already see already, if I may here. Oh, I don't have the slide up.
So
Apple has said that they're going to let you opt into your facial retinal scans to be able to get onto your digital ID. That's so nice of them.
yeah, that is nice. No,
That
so
is great.
So what happens? Is that saying that soon there's going to be two different prices of silver, the kind of imaginary world value of estimated silver versus the silver that people actually have and they know that it's accounted for in hand will be at a different price?
Yeah, there won't be any pricing discovery in terms of like real markets as you saw before.
So you can't just go look and see what it's going for today. That won't be the real value of the silver. It'll only be the value of who has it and what they're going to let you have it for.
Correct. And I have a question here. Isn't the COMEX owned by China for several years now? No, that's the London Bullion Metals Exchange, and it's more on the zinc and those types of industrial metal side. It's not really the London Bullion Metals Exchange. It's just the metals exchange that's in London. There's a huge difference between those two. So yes, there will be its own price structure where there will be bids across the internet that will say, we'll give you this much. And if you decide to arrange delivery somewhere, and there will be thousands of these internet posts coming up saying, hey, we can deliver this, or if you can get it to us, we will pay you this much. That will happen. So look for something like that. So somebody might say, we'll give you $500 an ounce for the silver if you can deliver it in like this city, Atlanta, Knoxville, Chattanooga, somewhere over in Nashville, whatever. We'll give you $500 an ounce, spot price cash, and we'll meet at this time. And then it's usually in a secured location. It'll be a business obviously offering that with the premiums, and you go in and they'll verify the metals are true, and then they'll pay you cash. This will be off that, and they'll consolidate that into larger pools within these regions or states, and then that will become the available sale for the metals. So I was watching Bill Holter today earlier saying, even if this were to happen, even if people were offering $50,000 an ounce for gold, there'd be no takers, right? Because all they would know is there's blood in the water everywhere, and if you just wait another day or two, that somebody's going to offer 70. Like this will become unobtainium to a point now, and to a point until it reaches its crescendo, and then there'll be some stability and they'll restart a market somewhere. Now there'll be a small window of probably, he was saying like 2 to 3 months where it's going to be, everything is just going to dissolve as we know it into the ether of markets that used to be. Like things will just go poof in the night. So he's like, if you have stocks, you need to actually get that paper stock certificate, not let them like in TD Ameritrade or something hold as a broker, because the broker actually holds your stock. You don't own it. You're a creditor for them, an unsecured creditor. So you need to get the paper certificates, and then you can own the actual stocks at that point. So he was giving a list of things to do in preparation of this event. So Martin Armstrong also says war coming up in 2026. So that would make sense. If we get into this cascade where they can't deliver, markets are going crazy, the only way out is going to be a war. And that's always the way it has been. So let me go back to this Italian story, because this thing is just absolutely ridiculous in itself. You and I were talking for a second before we started. Let me find this, I'll try to bring it up here. So Italy considers a one-time 52% tax cut on private gold holdings, meaning they don't know where the gold is. It's multi-generational, and they want you as an Italian citizen to go, hey, we got all this gold from like 4, 5, 2, 3 generations. And please essay our gold is what they're actually selling. So as the story continues, if you can almost believe this silliness here, the Italian government believes they can raise 2 billion euros by having people come in and show their gold and get it essayed. Meaning, I got gold from 1910, or I got gold from 1850. It's in our family, and let's say we got 50 pounds of gold. We are supposed to take that 50 pounds down. They're going to verify that it was 1800s gold. We have no purchase certificate for it. then they want us to pay in our families a one-time tax of 12.5%. But here, you're cataloged on the books. So any price increase from that point, they're probably going to hit you with 50% capital gains, 100% capital gains. Maybe it'll be forced, like we did in the 1930s. It'll be confiscated. They actually believe people are going to turn in and go assay their gold here. They say there's about 4,000 to 5,000 tons of gold that's off the books in Italy. Well, I sure as hell don't see them going into the Vatican asking them to assay their gold. It's only individuals. And I can't believe the silliness of this. And if you don't, you're going to get hit with a full 26% tax if you don't on the entire sale of the gold versus, like, let's say the gold, I went in and said, well, I got this for, $10 an ounce in the 1800s or $20 an ounce in the 1800s. It's 4,000 now. You're going to have to pay the 12.5% on that 4,000. But in the future, you're going to have to pay 26% on all of it. And I'm sure that 26% is just the beginning number, and it will rise up in the high 80s or 90%. As many people have talked about, these capital gains on metals, when these events occur, that's not going to be 50%. Like, you took half my sale. No, it's going to be 90% or forced confiscation. So think about that. You just made an enormous amount of money. You bought silver at, let's say, $15. It went up to $800. So you got $785 of profit there. And you're like, hell yeah, I'm going to just cash a few and pay off my house and whatever. When the government swoops in and goes, no, 90% of that, $780 is now ours. You get to keep $78 off of that. These are the things that are intended and been talked about with many of the people that I watch that are in the gold arenas here. It's kind of unnerving and
Well, and you know that it ends weird when it goes digital, right? So once that the government start trying to insist that only digital money is used, you have a hard time going to somebody and trading that precious metal for digital money because somebody somewhere wants a receipt of it instantly. And that's why they keep passing all these laws in different countries, including the United States, to keep track of smaller and smaller amounts so that you can't trade things and barter things and have your own market value for a specific thing. They want to make sure that everything is digitized and receipted, tracked and traced. So it kind of brings the subject up, what kind of black market is going to arise where people will be taking gold, silver, even copper, other things for some kind of digital exchange that doesn't, how is that going to work itself out in the future where there is literally no privacy. And even if you're doing things in private, it makes waves where like the sharks in the water know something's happening. So they're going to want that tax. And it amounts to really just confiscation, because once the people tell them or start asking questions about, what to do with their gold and whether or not it's fair or not, then they get a new list of everybody that has said gold. And like you said, they're not going to be going after any world powers. But I've always wondered what the actual price of a specific metal versus diamonds or silver, whatever it is, the amount that they say it's worth in the public versus how many and how much is in private hands. Like, we know that there are individuals around the world, including the royal family and others, that have large stockpiles of private amounts of gold, in which if they announced how much they had at any time, they have that wild card to just completely collapse a precious metals market, like overnight. So if several of the people that had a lot of gold in private came out and gave a new estimate of their private holdings, it would change the value of silver, gold, or whatever it was, including diamonds and other things.
Perhaps, but you ask that question. Farmers, I know, would probably trade you silver for food, because in the communities around, that silver would be used to on trade for something else, like a chainsaw or fuel. Like, you're looking at money, those paper dollars, they move around communities too. They never find their way to the bank. It just sits in somebody's wallet. They put it in a old cigar box. And when I need to pay for something, I'll pull it out and pay cash for that. And that moves to the next person. I paid somebody to help me do some construction out here. That person goes, and spends it at a bar somewhere. That person buys something with it. Trades off, gets some beef from the farmer, whatever, goes to the farmer's market here. Those Amish guys keep cash. So the same dollar keeps circulating around in the community here. Would it not be the same with a 1 ounce round or a half-ounce round, a silver, quarter-ounce, 10th-ounce round? It would just stay in the community and keep getting recirculated where that value is between goods and services that are needed in and amongst the community.
Right. Well, that's what I said. You would have to have a black market open up just for things like that, and even
I don't think
trading.
I'm going to disagree. I don't think it's going to be black. I think it's just going to be the way trade is done in countryside settings outside of these tightly regulated cities. Like, you're not going to be able to walk into 7-Eleven and drop an ounce round on there and go, "Hey, don't tell anybody."
No.
It'll be in the communities.
Well, that's a black market, though. That's an out
Well,
of the
that's your
government
definition. My
system.
definition is free commerce that just exists because there's a need for it.
Yeah, that's what
Come
the
and
drug
arrest me,
dealers say.
come and arrest me, ransom.
I know. I'm just joking, but that is what any market that the government says is illegal, whether it's cheese, guns, drugs, gold, whatever it is, it's a black market, and they'll treat it as such. That's the kind of world that they're trying to push us into, where you have no choice but to create these black markets to go around them and use barter and other things. I mean, I can imagine next a law that literally says you can't trade items if it's above a certain amount without the government being involved. Like, say I wanted to just trade my RV for 2 cars and a motorcycle or something. They would want in there, and they would want capital gains on all of what they perceive as somebody made profit.
Yeah, and how do you get around like something larger, like a piece of real estate or a house? Like just a land or a house. How do you come around that sale again? Because there's going to have to be some overage on that. Even if you did, even if you sold it for $1,000 more than you bought it for, then there's still a capital gain to be paid on that for a couple $100, which would require you to pay taxes and
Yeah,
file taxes on that for the capital gain, right?
right.
So
And
even
the
if it's
sca-
$1 over, you're still going to owe 20 cents, which would require you to get into that whole system of I sold something. Right? There's no way to do it. If you take it at a loss, I'm not sure how that works. If you could sell below market value, would that work? And you wouldn't have to file the taxes on it because you wouldn't actually have a capital gain. But again, that those with incredible increases in property values these days, I don't think anybody's really going to believe that you're selling at a loss when you could just put it on the market anywhere and get
well, I guess
exponentially above what you paid for it.
we'll just have to do what the Vatican's doing there and say, hey, I ain't got no gold. I just got a couple of candle holders and a lamp and some other paperweight here. I don't have any actual money though. You imagine
No
you got
money. Well, that's what the elite do. This is what the wealthy families do. They never sell anything. They just borrow against it. I've talked about this in a couple shows previously. They never, ever borrow. So for me, for example, setting up the house in a trust, an irrevocable trust through an LLC, and then taking the property and then getting a home equity line of credit or doing something else to draw the equity out of it. So then all you're looking at is a massive pile of debt. Like, this thing is mortgaged to the hilt. There's not a dime of anything left in this place because it's all been siphoned out and put into other things that are drawing a higher interest rate than the interest rate you'd be paying, or me paying on the money that I borrowed. So if anything were to happen, nobody's going to sue me out here. All they're going to do is get a pile of debt. Like, nobody's going to want the house. They're not going to be able to sell it for more. It's so mortgaged out, double, triple mortgaged, that all they're doing is looking on debt on top of debt on top of debt. But for me, that's money in the pocket on top of money in the pocket on top of the money in the pocket. That's earning a better interest rate than, again, what I'm paying on the interest itself. So, and then you start to look at that, and governments filing taxes. Well, it's at a loss for the year legally. And this is the only thing I learned of following money around, is this is how the elite continue to generate wealth. They never sell their assets, and they're always 1 or 2 or 5% ahead of the market. So great, earning 1% of that money, 1%, and just sits there for now, but it's just 1% growing every year. 1% don't matter to me. It's growing. I'm not losing money. It's 1%. But then in a few years, when interest rates come down, it'll be 2% or 3%, and it'll be that same money accruing in on itself. So then, in another 3 years from today, I got to wait 3 years. And when another 3 years from now, in 2028, I'll get this place revalued again, and then I'll scrape all the equity out of it again on the overage. And if it drops down, that's great too. Because then and when I do the taxes, I can say, well, property values decreased. I took some losses on this. So then that'll put me in the negative category. So then I can write more things off. This is how they do it. So you talked about the Vatican. That's exactly what they don't have anything. They don't sell anything. They only have assets they borrow against, or they can lend out and get a fee to borrow. So that it might be a candlestick for you and me, but somebody else, that's gold. They may melt it down and say, hey, well, we lent this, we leased our gold out, but they don't care if it's a candlestick from, the 1800s. It has really, there's no antique wealth with that. It's a piece of gold that's crudely fashioned into a candlestick. So I know the Vatican does this. They lease out their gold at a certain percent, and they don't care if they melt it down into bricks. They don't care if they get it re-refined, because they get that back re-refined back in the gold bars themselves. But they leased it out. They have so much gold over there. This is how all these families are doing this. I finally caught on to this a couple of years back. And for right now, it's working. Will I get burned in the end? Maybe. I don't know. But I'm looking at families that keep multi-generational wealth. So again, the thing about getting sued also, this is such a litigious country. Well, if you're going to come out and try to, fall and break your leg on a property or whatever, okay, there's some insurance for that. But you can't sue for the house or the property, because you're going to be paying for it. You're going to have to pay me to get the property. That's the whole thing about it. So I guess I'll stop there. So who wants to come and take my house? Yeah, you got to pay for it first. To me first, because I'm the first lien holder on it myself. So if you want to come sue me and take the house, you got to pay me first to get the property back. So thank you for buying it from me. Something like that.
I was thinking, for the next kind of scam to go with CO2, because I'm sure you saw that there's a lot of news articles out right now saying the climate hoax has collapsed. It's a trending thing about the whole idea of the CO2 issue and problem, and whether or not it drives climate and all of this other stuff. But I was just thinking, how you could buy credits from companies. They can buy, like a piece of forest and say, well, they offset their CO2 credits with that. Now you can kind of do it with people, I guess. That's kind of what they're going to be setting up next, as we kind of move into this weird era of weird things. You could go to war, you could get sick, or, the government could sponsor your carbon credit transfer to a new person. So maybe you could just sell your credits as a human breathing on the planet, because in a sense, that's what a climate tax or a carbon tax would essentially be, is a tax on breathing, because you're the one exhaling the CO2 for the plants there. But then maybe you could buy that stuff. But I'm really thinking that, with all of these other things, it's funny that a lot of people were worried about everything getting cold, and then they went through the hot phase, and I think they're going to be going back into the, wow, why is it so cold phase soon in the next couple of years. And I think these events that we're seeing with the sun and the magnetic field and all of that stuff's going to play a part in that. And that's kind of why they distracting everybody with stuff like this. The boogeyman, he had a little dude there. Like, this is the stuff that's really rolling on the headlines around. Or you brought up earlier the drunk cat, or no, I'm sorry, the raccoon, right?
The raccoon, yeah. I can't believe that got so much media and airplay.
Well, if you remember,
Catherine Barlow, thank you so much for buymeacoffee.com. We're over here on the comments. Mr. Muggles bought us 3 double espressos. Someone bought 3 double espressos. Very much appreciate the conversation. Catherine Barlow, if you read The Great Taking, I think he will want it in a trust. Yes, an irrevocable trust, and paid off through an LLC. Okay. I'll come back to that comment, but go ahead. And like, it's ridiculous how much play a raccoon can get.
Right. But if you remember,
story on the planet, a raccoon broke into a liquor store. What the hell?
Yeah. You remember last year about this time, there was a meth smoking raccoon. It's like AI generated news. No, we talked about it on the show, because you said, watch, you're going to find that. And I had it, but it was in another state there, not Tennessee. But it seems like they pump these kind of things out there for it's the goldfish effect, of course. But at the same time, they want you to put your faith in this technology, right? They're telling us that they got all of these cameras everywhere and all of this stuff. It's for our safety. It's going to help the future, digital transactions. for preventing fraud, catching crime, all of this stuff. And they're talking about the gate. And we've talked about it too with several different kinds of surveillance techniques and technologies and platforms, from Wi-Fi to just CCTV cameras. But here, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, these guys here said that they had a 94 to 98% match on this person that was accused of doing a crime in DC. And the story just kind of disappeared. And then the very next couple of weeks, they're saying, don't worry about that article that you had, that we told everybody that our secret technology matched this person 94 to 98% based on their unique stride, which is the gate that's being analyzed everywhere using surveillance. But this week we have a different person that doesn't match that gate and is not that person. So on the low end, and I think this is going to go everywhere from financial records to medical records, everything is going to be slightly off when it comes to certain topics. You're just not going to be able to find the truth on a thing, despite them saying, maybe if it was a lesser crime, like you robbed an ATM, you could get convicted on this 94 to 98% match in a unique stride, because they're saying almost 100% sure that it's you. And this is the technology that they're rolling out for law enforcement to do things. But at the same time, right in your face, they're telling you, well, that ain't what happened. Don't worry about that. And it's the same thing, like over and over again, these ideas come out to the public that they kill, because they realize, if you realize what that really means, it'll fundamentally transform the way you view the world. So if you knew that they could 98 to 100% know that you had a certain gate and keep track of everybody, and they're also adding AI drones, and they're interconnecting all of these networks to run, that they can factually track each individual, their automobiles, their finances, their health records, everything. It's just adding up in this avalanche of meta. But whenever you look in the real world, and we've been talking about that those are all jobs that somebody had in the surveillance state, or the deep state, or whatever you want to call it. There were people there that did these jobs, that listened, that tracked, that did that. All of those people are, guess what, they're getting replaced too, because it's not just the great log off, it's many sectors of human jobs are just being completely dissolved. And you see stuff like this. Dying shopping malls are the Roman ruins of our civilization. And then let's go in further. Is a global housing bubble about to burst? Like, there's, for some reason, technological humans can't figure out how to have enough houses for the amount of people that they have in any given country. And then they bombard us with worrying about a complete and utter annihilation nonstop. But in the background, they're not really doing it. They're just small skirmishes and distractions of, wild things. And they keep having to top themselves each month or each year with a new thing. That's why one year you can see a meth smoking pipe, being handled by a raccoon. And the next year you got a raccoon breaking in a liquor store that's super drunk, that dominates the media airwaves. But then in the background, the only other option there is, stuff like this. You got, for the people that don't believe birds are real, we're putting spy pigeons out, not us, Russia, putting spy pigeons out there with brain implants. I mean, it just keeps getting wilder and wilder. And you were talking about Japan earlier, and some big news is going on in Japan. And I think it's a trigger for a wider transformation of what's going on in the world. So I was watching their money go up and then skyrocket there. And then at the same time, them talking about upping the rates on everything. But at the same time, in the background, Trump and Xi have been talking, and they've been talking about downplaying the risk of war breaking out in Taiwan. And just the other day, the new prime minister of Japan said, you know what, we're not worried about that anymore. We're going to go back to our earlier 1972 status, that it is indeed an island of China. So,
yeah, well,
and we talked about this a couple years ago, about how maybe South Korea and Japan may, because out of their own benefit, go into the trilateral form of government. And when I mean trilateral, that's like the George Orwell 1984, but in real life, the Trilateral Commission, talking about segmenting the earth into three segments there, the Trilateral Commission, and one of those would be this Asian bloc. Well, unfortunately for Japan and South Korea, however they want to live, they are in that Asian bloc and they are within the Chinese empire now. And I've been watching the maps. So all of that island and everything on the west coast of Asia, around all of those islands, is completely saturated with drones, AI boats, and patrols from China who are increasing their number of their navy daily. And I mean daily. Like, they're building ships. They know what's coming. They are going to control, in my opinion, the Western South Pacific and the Western Eastern Pacific at the top there. I mean, the Northern Pacific. They're going to have that, and they're China's buddies with Russia, who also has a big peninsula out and a lot of interest in having naval resources out there. So, sorry, that was a long-winded thing about just pointing out that things are changing here.
Yeah, one of the places they're going to put missile defense systems, at least from Japan, was on Yonaguni Island. And Yonaguni Island is that Graham Hancock scuba diving underworld's island that has Yonaguni Island, that 120-foot deep, man-made and carved recessed plateau that was, at the time, a worship center when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than they are today, that Yonaguni Island. So I was looking at this one here anyway, because I'm really into this Asian news, seeing how I got a house in Taiwan as well. China reinstates ban on Japanese seafood imports, escalating tensions after Japanese PM warned Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger a military response. That's why they were setting up their missile batteries and defense systems on Yonaguni Island, which is just off Taiwan coast to the, say, northeast 2 o'clock position. And China then had just cut off their seafood imports or exports from Japan, imports into China. So 700 major exporters of seafood now have to find different markets. But at the same time, they're doing the same with music and industry, entertainment people. They'll get them in there and they'll set up the stages. And then suddenly literally the morning of the performance, when they were going to be going, oh, we're going to cancel the performance. This is happening. They're playing this tit for tat, China cheap like that. They have all these cheap shots, which they do routinely. So, you're looking at this type of news, but that's just what it is. You can see the 10 kingdoms forming as we speak. I had a conversation with somebody today and they were saying, do you think China would ever invade Taiwan? And I was like, well, not really right now, because they have the top 2 chip making facilities going on there. And by them destroying that, it would set the entire global agenda of all this, like you say, drone usage, AI, autonomy, track and trace. It would set it back at least a decade, maybe more, because you just don't build those facilities and come out. And the ones in China are so rudimentary. They're, far behind what is the cutting edge. That's all in Taiwan. Korea lost that spot. It's all in Taiwan. So to destroy that, you literally are going back 5 years in time on chip making process. But by the time that supply would even catch up, hell, they're talking about just the RAM inside your computer now not being available and costing 4 times more. And they're only going to sell to AI data centers. Even at that rudimentary thing of RAM, which is so easy to produce, to just RAM like you have in your computer, 16 gigabytes of RAM or 64 gigabytes, something like that. You're talking about the highest processing possibility for these superconductive chips coming out. If you set that back, then everything doesn't work anymore in terms of drones. And especially in the sizing of it, when you're getting in the size is the big thing on how they're able to take these superconductive chips and take them down in such a small, these nano sizes is the new technological jump and breakthrough. And Taiwan's the only one that's able to do it right now. So to go in there and destroy that, everything as we know it in this whole world they're trying to push on us stops and goes back a decade. So I can't see that happening currently. So that's my 3 cents worth. My wooden nickel 3 cent piece worth.
Well, we're talking about
for joining us tonight.
We were talking about this whole thing because that's the key to any future war that they're going to have, and all parties have basically expressed this, that the future of warfare and space travel and everything else that comes in the next phase of humans is going to be based in computing powers. Even that Holloman Air Force Base article I started with is talking about how all the robots and the drones and the AI Air Force by 2030 now, they've bumped up the timeline. I used to tell everybody about the PNAC plan to have it by 2025, but they're on course and on par with that happening. And, that expresses that. And here's Zelensky's plane supposedly comes under drone attack. And then, they're doing this thing. It's weird. It's almost like we might be creating the news in some way. Right here, Putin sends chilling World War III threat with flying Chernobyl nuke. It's unstoppable. And, a couple of years ago, we were talking about how they keep battling over that area of Chernobyl. And there's just several different scenarios in which the same thing happens, whether it's a nuke, a regular nuke goes off somewhere in Ukraine, whether they accidentally bump one of those, power plants there with something bad, and then you get poisoning that way. You also have the possibility of one side giving a dirty bomb to the other side, and then you just have outright threats of flying Chernobyls in that area. And why in that area? Because they grow so much wheat, but not just that, the entire water system of Eastern Europe runs through that area. So if you mess up one spot near that, then a whole other area. And if you think about it, that would create this wall between the sectors that people didn't really cross, like a militarized zone, but it would be like a radiation zone. But
we see it in every movie, don't we? Like nobody ever went into the hinterlands because of the
Right.
radiation after the war.
But then
it's always that demarcation zone, right? It's always like that in every movie we've seen.
And then they give us all these scary headlines. But like I said, with Taiwan, you get conflicting, kind of information out of like even Japan there. They're giving conflicting information. Yes, we're ready for this. But at the same time, we're not going to think about it. And we recognize that that's a part of China. But we're going to put some missiles up, so you get this two-sided thing. And we're supposed to be almost, at the throats, us and Russia. But at the same time, we're sending up cooperative space missions. So, there's obviously two stories happening. One of them is going to be what's actually being planned out. And it seems like the powers of the world have already agreed. We're just going to upgrade the technology. We're going to block everybody off. We're going to censor everything. We're going to restrict travel. We're going to reduce the population. But not only that, we are finally, but not us, the nations, going to start stepping foot out and trying to mine and explore into space to make, some kind of next level jump in technology here. And all of China, even Pakistan and India have been playing roles in increasing space technology. And those all happen to be also the same nuclear country. So we might get something like the Space Odyssey 2001, which I thought about. If you remember, they were out there in space, the joint astronaut team of the Russians and the United States. And then while they were way out there by Jupiter and Saturn, they got the message that we were about to go to war. So they had to stop talking to each other inside the same spacecraft and making it tense for the astronauts there, whether or not they were literally going to have to fist fight the other astronauts in there, because their countries down on the ground wanted to go to war.
Kind of ridiculous. And speaking of the travel restrictions, I don't know if anybody out there is going to be flying this year, but there's going to be an enormous amount of new rules that are coming in. So, we can cover that after we come back from the break here. But if I would share my screen here, the new restrictions that are inbound. The shoes off rule. Remember the shoe bomber from one way back after 9/11. So we got to check the shoes. Okay. Well, the reason they're saying you don't have to do that anymore because they have these ultra sensitive. I forgot to take off my money belt one time, and then they're like, "Stop!" I go, "Why? I don't know." And then you could actually clearly see that I had money and credit cards in my money belt, right? But I forgot because I wrap it around, and then I was like comfortable. And I forgot I had that in there. So when like take everything off, that silhouette of me, you could clearly see the money in the money belt on my person, So the check bags They're going to have to fit in. There's an entirely new sizing structure of the check bags. There can't be any more of those pockets that stick out. If it does not cleanly fit inside the new, I guess, test station, you have to check it. And there are no exceptions. So basically what it means is that they're making everybody buy new luggage to try to spur the economy. And they're just making it more and more difficult to be able to go out and travel is another thing. That's the whole, the reduction of travel is the big thing that's we keep hearing about, is it not? All we hear is, well, it's going to be this, you're going to have to, less flights, and if you the real ID, they're going to charge you $45 if you don't have that. And you must have a passport. If you have a passport, see, this is where it gets into sticky. Right now, you can still travel with a passport as an American citizen, but in the future, they will probably make you get the real ID in addition to your passport. And in England, the ridiculousness is you need to get this new real ID in England. And they're like, you can use your passport and your driver's license to get this new ID. And they're like, wait a minute, we just verified that we're still ourselves by using the passport and the ID that we have in England to get this new ID. Why can't we just use one of those that we use to get the new ID? And they're like, no, it doesn't work like that. You got to get the new one, but use your passport or you just can't travel. See, that's the thing. Like England has already jumped ahead and told us what they're going to do. Right now, the real ID is going to be required if you don't have a passport. But in the future, you're going to have that even though you have a passport. Just follow what's going on in the UK. Clearly visible. And the new liquid items that you are going to be able to carry this time that you could not before are going to be breast milk and these sort of things, formulas, prescription medications. Sometimes it's in a gel pack or something, but you have to carry them in a plastic bag. Now, the biggest thing is going to be the actual size of the luggage that is coming into play. And I know millions and millions of people are going to get burnt on this one. And you're going to get charged $45 if you don't have the real ID. And you have to go in and they're going to make you retinal scan, and they're going to take at least 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes to pay your fee. Then you're going to have to jump through a whole biometric thing so they can match up with your fingerprints and with your retinal scan if you don't have your real ID. This is all planned for 2026. So if you're like, well, I'll just pay the $45. Okay, it's not that easy. You're going to have to give a full biometric set to be able to get through that checkpoint. It's not like you're just going to, okay, Colin, this is my ID. There's going to be many, many hoops and hurdles to go through. I mean, they're trying to rope everybody into this thing here. So anyway, Ransom. Everybody tonight, thank you so much for joining us. CivilizationCycle.com. You can sign up for our show notes, 10 bullet points of things we're discussing tonight so you can start the conversation with others. Also, buymeacoffee.com/Civilization Cycle. And I would like to come back to Catherine's comment, the great taking. I think you will want it in a trust because that's the whole thing. The great taking is about taking from individuals. As far as I've seen, the ones that are going to be, I wouldn't say immune from it, are the companies and corporations and entities set up as business, because if those brokers are going to be able to hold all of your stocks and they're the ones that are going to bail it in for you, then it seems there's two different classes of people on the planet. Those that have, registered businesses and their assets are inside the business or inside, this sort of trust and that sort of thing, like all the families do. And then you have everybody else who's just outside in the system using regular banks and things. So this, at least it seems how it's going to, the cream shall settle. Let's say the oil and water will be separated this way. Individuals will be stripped of all their assets. Corporations and business entities shall remain, let's say, intact. And that's the way it seems like it's going to sift out in the end here. So please support our sponsors tonight. We support them. They support our broadcast. And you can keep us on air by supporting them. So we'll see you in a couple minutes. 2 and 2, as Chuck Woolery would say. It's more like 3 minutes and 2 seconds. But anyway, I thought I would come line. We'll see you in a minute. Come back for second hour here. Civilization Cycle podcast.
We've been told that tooth decay and gum disease are inevitable. But what if they're not? What if everything you've been taught about invasive treatments to restore your smile was a myth? As a bioterrain physician, An herbalist with over 40 years experience, I'm well aware that teeth are living tissues that connect to every other part of the body. Your overall health starts in your mouth. This is why I've created nature's perfect formula to remineralize the teeth and heal the gums. Using a blend of powerful ancient oils and minerals, along with the latest in cutting-edge herbal technologies, I formulated the ultimate natural tooth serum to ensure a bright smile and healthy gums.
This is not a toothpaste. It's a revolution for your teeth. Remineralize, strengthen teeth, all natural ingredients, essential oils, minerals, salts. Alpha Vedic Dental Solutions System. That's alphavedic.com/civilization. You know, we're always trying to bring you the best products here that we think will enhance your life, especially if supply chains break down further or if there's some disruption in our lives here. It seems in the news more and more possible, but hey, who knows? Maybe it's a mind game. But what is not is keeping your dental health up. And not a lot of people are talking about this. We always see the storable foods. But what about dental care during these same emergency situations? Will your toothpaste eventually run out? Well, if it does, then what? So like I say, this whole micro gut biome is driven by your oral cavity first. So take a look at what they have, alphavedic.com/civilization. Every purchase you make helps keep our live radio show and podcast on air, bringing you more information just like this. alphavedic.com/civilization. That link is in the show notes below. And as always, I appreciate your valuable time and joining us in this ever and most important conversation as we move forward in our world.
A huge challenge with our modern food system is that it's devoid of critical enzymes found in raw whole foods. Destroyed by poor agricultural practices, overprocessing, and cooking, our foods simply don't deliver the enzymes and nutrients our bodies need for optimized health. This imposes a much heavier burden on our bodies to replace the enzymes missing from our foods, depleting the enzyme potential of the body, weakening immune function, metabolism, and overall health. The good news? Patent-pending Ensorb addresses this problem head-on. Ensorb uses VNI's proprietary proteasome absorption technology to rapidly deliver the metabolically activated multi-enzyme complex directly into your blood. What can Ensorb do for you? How about unsurpassed, enhanced digestion of your foods, improved gastrointestinal function, improved immune function, strengthened metabolism for improved overall energy and vitality? And it does it all with its proprietary technology that can enhance bioavailability and absorption.
Head over to vni.life/civilization or click on that link in the description box below. Takes you directly to the Ensorb page. When was the last time you could trust your gut?
Please remember to sign up for our show notes. With Civilization Cycle podcast, you can learn what to expect as society resets. Agriculture, economy, tech, and history all have mappable cycles, and these cycles affect every aspect of our lives. We can navigate the chaos and thrive together with up-to-date news and information. Also, if you like the content we have here on Civilization Cycle, think about fueling the discussions and the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Civilization Cycle. And thank you for all the support.
Still tossing and turning, the modern world can really take a toll on your body's circadian rhythms, the internal clock. Hemp Lucid's sleep gummies use natural ingredients that are carefully balanced to help you drift off to sleep naturally and enjoy rejuvenating sleep all night long, all without habit-forming sedatives or melatonin. Curious about better sleep naturally? Check out these blueberry lemon sleep mushroom CBN gummies, reishi, lemon balm, valerian root, with full spectrum hemp extract that may support a sense of calm. Ready for a better night's sleep? Click on that link in the description box below. Hemp Lucid blueberry lemon sleep gummies. And welcome back for the second hour right here, the Civilization Cycle podcast, bringing you through the late night hour. Just before going on break, Just to finish up the point about the great taking. Now, I've seen David Rogers Webb, and I watched the full documentary series. I've seen a lot of interviews with him and others. I've actually been wanting to talk to him. I wrote a couple emails out to their website asking if I could get him on the show, or even get him on this show here to talk to him a little bit about, here's where the gray area is. The way I had seen it presented, it seems that individuals are going to get just scraped to the bone of anything they own. Every asset's going to be just ripped from their fingers, because you're just a person, or just normal people, or just people that have a mortgage with the bank. As a person, an individual, they just have a savings account or just a checking account. It's a person. But what I haven't seen is how business entities registered are not people. They're business entities. They're in a different category themselves because they're a registered business, which is an entity, not an individual. So this is where the gray area is, and I don't have all those answers that perhaps you would like me to talk about. I just don't. But I do think there's some shifting of, the corporations are not going to get bailed in themselves. The corporations and the companies are the ones doing the bailing in all the individuals to save their asses. They're going to bail in the savings. They're going to bail in the mortgages. They're going to bail in anything with cars, get it digitized, assign a value to it. They're going to own it, and then they're going to lease it back to you with the terms rewritten. So to pull everything over into a business entity, whether it be a trust or whether it be an LLC with a trust on top of that, brings you into a business entity sphere versus being an individual. Now, can that be pulled away? Will be seen. But the first lowest hanging fruit is everybody's individual bank accounts, everybody's individual mortgages, everybody's individual, whatever they have, because even, if you look, even on the, let's say the title of your car, you've paid off your car totally, you still don't own that automobile. The banks and somebody else up the chain still owns that. You have to look on, even if you pay off your house, you're still listed as the tenant, even though you've paid off your mortgage full clear, still on that deed at the bottom, fully paid, you're still listed as the tenant on it. So that's the whole thing. As people were saying, well, what if your land's already paid for? As an individual, you still are at some possibility of having your land confiscated because you are the tenant on that. And, you go back into different type of deed laws, because some of the states in our country, far back, this is going to be the 1800s, where you can get the deed, the trust deed. A lot of times when they're giving away land back at that time, if you can trace that all the way back, you can actually grab that deed, and that keeps you outside of that modern banking system. You are actually truly the landholder because you owned the deed at that time. Otherwise, I don't know. Are we coming into the great taking? Martin Armstrong, I watched a couple interviews with him lately. His Socrates algorithm is saying for sure 2026 war is coming. Not going to be with really Russia. It's going to be something China based. So again, that's what we were talking about in the first hour here. Like, why would Japan put missile batteries and defensive batteries on Yonaguni Island? And again, you rewind the clock, it seems like a lot of these ancient historical areas or historical sites are always the points of where defenses are set up, even in our modern era. Because if you're looking at the lines of islands coming out, you got Taiwan and Japan and the Philippines. That's that first line of islands. But as you're going over to the second line of islands, which is Tinian and Micronesia, that whole second line of out there, between that, there's a couple islands like Guam, which is still part of Micronesia, but it's the first island, and then Yonaguni. So you only get those the couple islands between those two sets of islands. So that's my 2 cents to start us off here. Three wooden nickel and a 3 and a fake old 3-cent copper penny. Anyway, Ransom, I appreciate you joining me for the second hour. As we roll through this, I do have some slides and tried to throw some things together. If I could get your ideas on this here, Ransom. I was trying to pull this article up earlier, just when we started. So mortgage data breach hits JP Morgan, Citi, and Morgan Stanley after large-scale vendor cyber attack. So you look at that and you go, okay, well, anybody who had any legal documents, mortgage applications, contracts all got their data hacked. And I was thinking, well, that's must be on the corporate side, maybe, because I don't know that many people are really, with JP Morgan as an individual. It's more of a business type of thing. Citi as well, Morgan Stanley, they like business clients, right? They don't like you and me. We don't make 100 million as, but here's what's scary. If I may zoom this out. So a recent study by Security Scorecard found that 97% of the top 100 US banks suffered at least one third-party data breach in the past year, underscoring how fragile the ecosystem has become. Ransom, your thoughts on that?
That sounds like a lot of property and money tied up in limbo where it can be, accused that something's not on the up and up now that it's involved with security breaches. I mean, think about how in the past we've had banks that tried to foreclose on people that they didn't have the title to, and things like that, and it all got hung up in court. And whether or not you had enough money to defend against the bank that says they're foreclosing on your home that you never had a mortgage on. This sounds like more of that. I mean, think about all of the legal status and limbos or accusations about who sold what to who when, or whether or not it's legitimate or fraud. I mean, that sounds like a nightmare. But that's the reality of all of this online stuff, is that it is not private. No matter how much the banking institution or mortgage institution or even your own files that are in the form of data are not secure. They're just not. I mean, there's the illusion of security and privacy, but the reality is that's just not the case.
Yeah, and also some of these big three that are, supposedly the credit monitoring. What's that? Equifax, Experian, and I forget the other one. But Equifax has been hacked twice already. And they're the ones responsible for keeping all your data. See, again, I think it's very illegal that they have full on credit reports, full on just bastions of information about us firewalled off into your own file.
Right.
But they can't even protect that. And they're supposed to be the ones that are.
I mean, does that sound like something that could possibly happen to somebody as you got your data stolen?
You got to
From
verify it. Digital ID, man. I got to verify it's you.
Right. But then they inform you that, you have to move because your home was sold by somebody else with other credentials that hacked all of the information needed to do that. And then what happens? It's up to the courts to decide who's right. But that's just like a scary thing. But that happens constantly with all of these things, like even the entertainment ones with Social Security. Like all of the different ways that you could have metadata, it seems like they've been breached at one time or another, from Apple to Amazon, or even X and some of the other platforms that allow you to pay for things or have interactions with money, because you tied your financial information in there. And think about the way that X is set up. If you want to have a certain status on it, you literally have to give them a copy of your photograph, your ID. So you have to verify on the internet that you are indeed that person. So that's where all of this is going. Banking, social media, your health records, and appointments, things like that, or whether or not you receive Social Security. It's going to be tied up so much within the government and for the private sector that no one will ever be sure of anything. And we've talked about that in a different level, like as far as watching media. We're beyond the point that realistic things can be created and then sold to the public as a reality. And, you have to wonder sometimes, are some of those things happening? But, just for a minute to get a little woo-woo here before we get back into the financial doom and transition of the
No way.
nations of the planet.
We're gonna stay woo woo. I got one to follow you on this. I'm like a duck on a June bug, dude, right on top of the supermoon.
We're in these little, real cycles that everybody's has these ideas about. So right now, tonight, if you go outside and look up and your skies are clear, you can see the last supermoon we're going to have for some time. It's not expected to be visible again until 2042. So here's a little lunar cycle of a supermoon. So imagine back in time, all through these other cycles where man constantly looked at the moon And, sometimes it's far away, sometimes it's close, but every so often it's just, giant, in your face, unforgettable. And they kept track of everything like that. But there's this whole other scale outside of our planet and our moon and the way we look at the stars of these other things floating around. Just so happens to be around the same time our sun might be acting funny and our magnetic field might be a little funny. And, but this, I know everybody's all on this whole story that's unfolding, which it's a pretty impressive story, and it causes so much speculation that now even some of the naysayers, it's an electric comet, or maybe they say it's just a big rock, or it's a normal comet. There's just so many weird things about it now that the weird things are outnumbering the normal, natural idea of how we think these objects work. So now they're saying, it has a mysterious heartbeat pulsating from interstellar object 31 Atlas as it nears Earth, right? And what they're talking about basically is, let's see here, what's the
Is it a
next one?
comet or is it a spacecraft, Ransom?
Right. There's things that would indicate maybe it's both, as some people on the internet are saying. It could be both. You can't rule out one just because it is the other, and vice versa. But you look at these super straight jets in this almost geometric pattern here. And the way that it has been putting out jets, and Greg Allison over there on his channel has been covering it. There's been this long, straight jet coming out of it that when it was behind the sun put out this giant poof, like it accelerated or had some kind of explosion and left a lot of debris behind. And then the weeks following, it starts putting out these structured jets with what they're calling Loeb over there is calling, hey, look, it looks like internal propulsion. And we already know that it's not behaving in the normal way of a normal object that tumbles and moves around. And if it had any jets on it, they would be leaving these kind of spiral things near the center of it. But that's not what you're seeing with this.
That's a great photo too. And I might say the trajectory of it changed heading out toward Jupiter, where it's going to be ahead of Jupiter, when before it was supposed to arrive exactly at some sort of conjunction with Jupiter. But after it came around behind the sun, it's actually sped up. So the new models are showing it going out, ahead of Jupiter.
Right. And
something happened there. So are our mathematics that bad that we can't even track an object in the sky, or did it actually speed up?
I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that something is going on that we can't recognize, and that possibly is technological in nature, simply for the reason that not only is you're getting these weird symmetrical jets out of it that seem to be keeping it on a specific course, the acceleration, the non-gravitational propulsion that it's been showing is not natural at all. Like I said, usually with these objects, you see tumbling and effects like that and uneven outgassing of different materials. But that's not what you're seeing with this. It seems to be course correction. And, it still might be a natural object. And like I said, others have pointed out it could be both a natural object with technological, things in it or on it or whatever. But it hasn't done this tumbling that almost every other object we've ever watched does. It's a big degree of variation in its non-gravitational propulsion of off-gassing, but not with this one. It's been pretty stable and hasn't really tumbled or moved out of its orbit in any way. And it literally shows all of the signs of what something would do if it flew into our solar system for the purpose of studying it and looked at each and every planet at the best times as it went by. And then when we, as a technologically, I would say inferior civilization compared to the different types of civilizations they say there possibly could be, we're pretty primitive on that scale. And this object seems to be that it would be just perfectly out of sight for us at the best chance we would get to look at it. But the best chance it has of looking at us is coming up here on December 19th. And it's doing all this weird stuff, pulsating, outgassing perfect jets of course correction. So, who knows? Woo! I don't know.
Get on the woo, man. So imagine if it's sending also adjusting energies to us on our planet. I was talking with Michael and Cindy over at Evolutionary Energy Arts just the other day, and they were talking about what if it imbues this upgrading not even technology. It's more in the spiritual sense. If it's bringing another resonance field into us, that's exactly the same. No, that's exactly the same article I had ready for us here, Ransom. I kid you not. View the tab. So let me
Well,
show you my tab. I'll show you yours if you show me mine.
right.
This is the same tab I got open right here. Whoa.
That's
Oh, wait,
you.
maybe
I
that was
just
my story.
accidentally,
You
yeah.
popped it up. Okay, you scared me. I was like, how was this guy stealing my show? Come on. Stealing the stories, Ransom.
But
So-
look at all of the weird things that we're having. We're having interstellar objects that aren't behaving right. We're having giant disruptions in the magnetic field. We're having wandering magnetic poles. We're having, the sun. What a lot of people think does look like the quarantine event situation going on, possibly. But I think that we're not going to know when it happens. We're not going to just sit around on the internet going, you know what? I think these ones are going to be the ones. It's just going to happen one day. The sun's going to burp out more than we can handle. And then who's in charge? But all of these people that set up this infrastructure for a reset.
Those with precious metals will still be in charge because that will be the default going back to. Nothing else will really have value except things of known value in the past that still have value, that will have value into the future. Tools, seeds, skills, metals, food, and whatever else. So here's an interesting thing is, I was talking with David Nino Rodriguez. I had him on the show the other day, and he was talking about EMP and all these things. I was kind of, I delved into it before, but he explained it pretty clearly that they're waiting for an EMP event, whether it's a large EMP that knocks out half the US or whether it's, something more regional that'll knock out a state or two. He was super incredibly convinced that what is in store for us is an EMP event. And I was like, the only way they can get away with that cleanly is having a solar flare that comes through of an X variant. Then they can ride on top of that and say, oh, it's a solar flare. And here, then we suddenly get, not even a day after we talked about the same exact thing, that what are they warning for? Disrupting power grids and communications. And this is the exact same thing. He was like, there's going to be an EMP. And I was like, well, they're going to have to ride on top. And then sure enough, we are the same group of sunspots that's coming around right now, which I talked about in video earlier. The same group that's rotating around right now is the Carrington event similarity. And they're expecting large X flare as this thing comes in Earth facing. So I thought I would throw that out there. Let me see if I can pull up the Space Weather Live and go back to just a day or so ago. Let's see what here we go. Let me pull this one up for you. I'm going to share this one instead. This is the newest show of what we have for sunspots here. Now, if you don't mind, if I jump in the large screen, I'm going to push this one out for us. What we're looking at here is sunspot 4296 and 4294. The way these are aligned right now in the intermixing of the different polarities within that, it's very similar to what they saw with the Carrington event setup of sunspots in the way. The only difference is if it turns into more of a S pattern where you're looking at 4294, if those move, those farthest reaching ones, say like the 3 o'clock position, if those start to gravitate a little more north and start to bend back on themselves, that'll be exactly the same thing we saw in the Carrington event. The only region is that leading edge there is not bent back on itself for that polarity to snap back on itself. This is what's coming in the next few days here. And as we look at this is definitely X-class flare, getting into it in terms of possibilities for it. And if you go off to Space Weather Live, which is another one, they actually show you the unders and penumbras that you can see within that. And you can take a look at, let me see where we're at, solar activity. The sunspot regions here, I'll share this tab instead. Now, this is off Space Weather Live. So if you come down through their feed, then what you can take a look is the actual sunspots themselves. And if you pull that back and you can see the different difference in polarity that is going to cause some of these large flares to go off. So let me zoom this in. We'll come through a couple of them. And the X possibilities on that group is 10%. Come down X possibility. Now, what you see is that they're not interlooping. So when you're looking at the penumbra and the number there, that you're just not getting that. The umbras 10%. So blue and red is what you're looking for. These are the opposite polarities. And once they come into contact, then they start to, that's what snaps off. They start to loop in on themselves, and that causes that discharge. So as you come down into the different possibilities for X-class flares, nothing there. You don't even see any of that blue coming in there. So that's what's on tap for us. The region has actually decreased since yesterday. So it was a 25% probability on this one here, but it seems that it's decreased. So maybe I'm just going to stop the slide. There's a 10%. That was 25% yesterday. So something's happened with 4294 and 4296. So what can I say, man? I'll just stop sharing that because I guess it's not a story at all now, is it? Because if it decreased down to 10% from 25 down to 10, then forget what I just said. Enjoy your weekend and have a great one. Bye.
Yeah, but you know what's funny about that is we could, like I said, we could just keep track of these now because of the technological level we're at. But it's like a spinning flywheel or something that's going to break sooner or later. There's chunks of it going to fly off. And I was kind of wondering, like, if I'm not mistaken, what you're looking at with the South Atlantic anomaly is a lot similar to what you see on the sun when you see sunspots. And here on Earth, our magnetic field is way weaker than what you see on the sun. So you're not going to see these big arching loops visible, but they're there. They're within our magnetic field. And when you have the poles moving back and forth, it's going to twist and contort these spots on the Earth. I don't know if that's what that is, has to do with, but it kind of seems like it might. If you have a whole area of the atmosphere that's kind of low or missing in an area, that might have something to do with the changing magnetic field.
Well, you would see the visibility of, okay, so this last solar flare that came in, you had these orange auroras coming in and these bright reds and colors you don't know. Orange is very rare anyway, because the way that things are ionized in the atmosphere, it's like two atoms are jumping within each other so quickly and trying to take on the charge of another one that the electron is switching from oxygen or nitrogen, and it's coming in and trying to jump off of there, that it's pulsing between itself, that it can't like grab onto one or the other, and it's creating orange by its own new electrical signature in that. That is so rare unless you have a highly, incredibly like amplified electrical atmosphere. So you got to think about, okay, so you got when you're looking at the traditional of anything on an atomical structure, you always have those things where it almost looks like the rings of our solar system, where you get these electrons in there and they're hanging out, and how many of those do you get? And, that's what the periodic table is based on. So when these electrons are jumping between themselves and they can't establish which one they're going to go to, the speed at which this happens is unthinkable, that they can't decide where they're going. So they're in a state of flux, and that electrical signature is that orange color that you see. But
Right.
It's only possible with certain electrical conditions.
Well, my point was kind of like, when you play with magnetic dust, you get to see a visualization of the magnetic field of that strong magnet when you got,
those field lines running down, once they get electrified in these blank spots, for a better term, where the magnetic field is incredibly low, that's where you start to see the highest energetic phase of this. So you're starting to see a lot more oranges and really dark reds and things in those same. Now, what's interesting though is we get all these amazing pictures of everything in the northern hemisphere over the Arctic, and it's like bazillion gazillion videos and images of everything on the North Pole, polar this. What we don't really get is the southern hemisphere images that are over South America, where that magnetic anomaly is. I would love to see more of those with an X flare from southern Argentina, southern Chile. You're right in that zone. Like, what are your images looking like? I just don't see that many. And especially with an X5 or something, where the magnetic field lines are supercharged, where you can actually see them. That sometimes I've showed many a video where you can see from space one of those electrified lines coming down.
Yeah, who knows if these
Australia,
are actually...
Yeah, that's the southern one there.
See if we can get something from...
Oh, we don't want to support the Guardian, you leftist piece of garbage there.
Let's see here.
Oh, you can see the Milky Way on that one. Nice. That's
It's just a
2022. I'm talking about the latest one in 2025, just like 2 weeks ago. The
oh
one that
yeah,
came ripping through.
that's what I'm saying. It's doubtful you're gonna get like an updated of those. And I was trying to get 2024 at least here, but yeah, that's
Yeah, Southern
seems like
Lights,
the
New Zealand 2020, but that's outside the zone. New Zealand's not in that magnetic anomaly spot.
right.
Patagonia is.
Yeah, and I've been reading a lot about Patagonia, and it's really, just like other places. The whole idea of the peopling of Americas is getting turned upside down, not only genetically, but from artifacts and things. So, I don't know if you saw that, but we were talking about the Jaman last week, and I sent you this article that was talking about a good percentage of, at least at one trip over into the Americas, a bunch of Jaman era descended people came over with one of the groups there and deposited their DNA along with people from Siberia and other places in Western Europe and Eastern Asia that moved all the way across the globe. And now we're finding evidence of, the clock keeps getting pushed back of when people were going where. So now we have a date of at least 30,000 years for South America through carved, I believe it was, well, I forgot, it was giant sloth bones, I think it was.
It was.
Um, but it's just another indication. And now I've read a recent paper that's talking about, a clear, straight 10,000 year genetic lineage of people in Patagonia that were just there the whole time, that had small influxes from people from other places like Oceanic group and straight up mainland China, and then further away. And it's funny because I've been tested. I've got my DNA tested, and I've been comparing the different companies. So each company is going to give you a slightly different answer depending on what they concentrate on. But now they're getting into the field of ancient DNA. So where like you could go back to, let's say, 19,000 years ago and compare your DNA to all of the DNA of that time period, right? And then you would get a totally different mix of what you thought you were, would be back then. And they're finding that, Europe and other places like the mummies in China, they have all these different DNA traces in them that go back to the Middle East, to the Near East, to the Far East. People were coming in all different directions, and they had this, this kind of outdated idea of the coupling of peoples around the world. Now we know that, even after hybridization with other hominids, people were just walking around in these spaghetti weaves all over the planet, including the Americas, for a really long time. Australia and that group of the Pacific Islanders is a unique group of people because they're the group of people that carry the highest content of both Neanderthal and Denisovan. So like they are ancient people. And then, you hear all these people talking about, well, I'm Irish or I'm German or I'm, whatever. Most of those countries, including Italy, Portugal, and all that stuff, they didn't even exist 2,000 years ago. So what those would have been was Roman, right? That was Rome at that time. And, they give these names. But think about this. You can now track your lineage. Like I tracked one of mine to, let's see here, 160,000 years ago in China, a Denisovan that shares DNA with me today in 2026 lived, so that, just think about the idea of this ever expanding clock going back in time where we're able to track back our lineages literally to, 40,000 years used to be a big number they were showing right there, but now that's a small number, right?
Yeah, that is. And here they're talking about ice age shorelines again, like some of these maps coming up. But the tales or some of the stories of these peoples exactly reflect what was talked about during this time. Like, how did they move from island chain to island chain? So think about this map I'm showing you here. If you moved north of Darwin or you went up all the way to the very top at that 12 o'clock position of what is not land now, but you would almost be touching Sumba Island in Indonesia from there. Like you literally could see it across the way with a canoe, a simple canoe on a day with calm water. you could have gone to Indonesia. And when you're looking at sea level rise or falls 40,000 years ago or 30,000 years ago, that was itself a giant continent, that every bit of landmass from Thailand all the way down from Malaysia through Indonesia was one, they call it Sundaland, it was just one giant landmass all the way through the Philippines. I mean, between the Philippines now, it's a bunch of islands there that are, an archipelago, but before it was an interconnected landmass that had a giant bay within it that some islands resided in. And that giant amount of, there were some, some passes through a few of the islands due to the depth of the trenches there. But otherwise, it was just one solid landmass. I mean, literally connecting right up to Indonesia, a canoe ride away, and you could have walked all the way to China from here. So when you're looking at how people could have moved around during this time, it gets a little bit interesting on truly what our history is, or what we've been told on how, people interconnected. It was supposedly there was no connection 40,000 years ago, but then the sea levels being different, how much easier it would have been. 400 foot lower sea levels, you're talking about massive amounts of water not being there. So when we look at our oceans, they're like, well, they couldn't have crossed the oceans. Yeah, not today, maybe. But think about if you could actually see island chains to the next one on clear days, and they would be completely underwater, 400 feet underwater now. I mean, the amount of land mass that was shown and available to walk across or easily get to, comparatively, I think we've been lied to about the history. I know deep in the Pacific, but still, a lot of these islands were 5, 10, 20 times bigger than they are today due to the sea level rise being lower. And some of those, what were considered wide gaps between each and other of those steps now in today's world, were very doable, and even rudimentary sailing vessels. I mean, shit, people go out in the ocean on 15-foot, 20-foot, 30-foot schooners. I mean, what if you were a village and you could build an 80-foot schooner or some sort of canoe rig like they did in Hawaii, Rapa Nui? That whole entire Polynesian culture advanced.
Right.
Using star navigation as well as using sails at the time, along with the canoes and, outriggers and everything. They were very advanced in using the ocean. Now, you don't think they could if sea levels were 400 feet lower, and we have continental land masses rising out over New Zealand is now, that's stretched up. I mean, sheesh. The Pacific was widely, drained at that point, except for the very deepest trenches. There were massive amounts of land that were seen and visible and above land. They don't do the thing around New Zealand because it was so gigantic. The other landmass around New Zealand was probably a quarter of the size of Australia when it was at that sea level.
That's the wrong one. I was going to try to demonstrate here something pretty trippy, I think, for people.
I think because our history, while you're getting that set up, I really believe the history we've been given is an absolute lie.
Well, here's one that they agree on. So if you did DNA testing, there's different companies that provide archaic DNA testing, so you can find out what percentage Denisovan perhaps you are, or how much Neanderthal you are. And I did that with a couple different companies. So one of them says that I'm like 1.96% Neanderthal, and the test for Denisovan shows I'm about 0.29% Denisovan, which is actually high for somebody of European descent. However, they only have so many samples of these archaic people, right? So they have a big database of Neanderthals, and they can literally match you with the closest Neanderthal or Denisovan that there was. So that means that you share DNA with that individual. Now, despite Denisovan being considered a different species, it was a human that built tools and presumably had a large brain based on what we know about it, just like Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon did. But here would be a sample that they say I share genes with and connected with, and this is at least 160,000 years old. That's a human being found in China, I think it was. That one. Here's one in Southeast Asia, a different sample that I also match, 164,000 years old to 131,000 years ago. Now, people are talking about tracing their ancestry a few hundred years and stuff. When the fact is that most people can really dive deep on checking their ancestry and looking at individuals that you share genes with that push the boundaries of the concept of human history. So some of the Neanderthal samples, I think one was at 50,000, another one that I matched was at 100,000. But those are people living in Europe, China, and elsewhere that are either, off a different branch that you shared a mother with, or are literally in the same branch that you are today. And it's kind of mind blowing to think that, people were moving around. Now, one company um, gives you kind of a breakdown of your ancient DNA as far as about at the turn of the ice age, which, like if you take a modern DNA like ancestry or something like that, they kind of hint at it, but it's completely different. So it's kind of convoluted, the idea that they're showing you there with different ages. So like if you compared me with someone 20,000 years ago, I would match East Asians about 3 to 5%. So like, someone elsewhere in Europe might have a little lower number, but I figured out why that is because when I track back my mitochondrial DNA, it goes back to one of the earlier hunter-gatherer groups, the U, which made its way over into today's world in southern Siberia and still kind of lives on the plains, but all of them are Asian people. They look East Asian, but I share a mitochondrial DNA with them, and it basically is not even testable in the Western world. Yet, if you did a test that said more recent, it would show, oh, well, your family lived in the UK for the last 2,000 years. So like, it's
Can you
all
take that piece of
convoluted.
paper with you traveling and be like, hey, I'm part of your tribe. You got to take me with you.
Right. And what's even cooler is some companies even offer you specific ancient DNA. Like, say, you wanted to know if you were a steppe pastoralist or one of the first groups of farmers that came out of the Middle East, which are kind of like Sardinians are today. And then like there's groups of the Western hunter gatherer that was there before people started farming and things like that. You can find out what percentage. So it's funny idea that they want to tell everybody how different they are through schooling and kind of the standard history of how man came about and what happened. But if you notice, they really only pay attention on people that went to war and won, right? Because you always point that out. For some reason, the bad guys never win in history. Never once has the bad guys won and then wrote a history of their history. Right? Always the good guy wins any battle, and then they get to decide that history. But it's so convoluted after many, many, many different overturns of resets. They really kind of hope, I think, humans don't get the past because we're about to repeat it in a fundamental way on the earth. Like, if you wrote a Lord of the Rings novel, it'd be about, empires crumbling and new people arising. And we talk a lot about the Middle East, how things are changing. And I got this one story I wanted to talk about because I think
Can I throw this one up? Because the
Yeah, go
change
for
that
it.
you're talking about here is, what we've seen through history. Was Venus a captured planet? Was it transiting through our solar system and it was captured? Because now we see a tail coming on December 3rd here. This is the planet Mercury, but it has a tail like a comet.
Right.
This happens every so often. It's not like, wow, there's a tail now, but it does happen occasionally. So it's not the first time. 24 million kilometer, and then did 0.6 by that. So, 18 million miles or so. So you take a look at what's happening. Is that a comet? Was that part of our ancient history as well? Because there's so many stories of, gods capturing other things and slaying things in the sky. Well, they were looking at the heavens with different types of electromagnetic events, as well as what if, you could actually see the planets like we do along the ecliptic, at least where I am, they're off this direction. From my field, it's going off to the west this way. Now, suddenly I'm looking at that, and then what if I see a new one captured going the other direction? Like, whoa, how would that blow your mind? Like, because people
Right.
were much more attuned into the night skies than we are now. Very few. You're watching TV, you're playing on the computer, you're doing like, very few people go out and star watch. I got a pair of binoculars on a tripod. I go out and look. It's just so fascinating to look at different, constellations up there. and beyond that into the nebulas and different things you can see. It's just mind blowing that what you can't see with your eye when you get in, even with nice binoculars, good pair, it still will just it's mesmerizing to look at these things, literally mesmerizing. So if you were to see a captured object start going the other direction and like, whoa, what was that? And it was a planetary body with a comet tail, and then it grabs and then gets stuck in a new orbit and it becomes, hey, that's the second year, the third year, the fourth year it's there. Then how would you describe that as a tale, an ancient legend? How would you describe that? And this is what things, somebody had seen this. They've described it already. It's not the first time that it's been done.
Right. We know that
It is part of our ancient history.
well, we know pretty much for a fact that people saw whatever impacted the earth in various places over a period of time, about 12,900. Things were happening, and there's documentation of it. I mean, like areas, and this is kind of where I was going with this, with all the technological government, everything changing. That say you were a person that lived back here in the Indus Valley at this city, and all of a sudden it just stopped raining. Like 1 month it rained less, then next year was even worse, and then by a couple of decades there was very little to no water around you, and you had this major metropolis there that had flushing toilets, public fountains. It was really almost next level as far as everything but the wheel, allegedly. But soon they met people that had the wheels, and then things went crazy as far as civilization, from Mesopotamia all the way over to India and China right afterwards. But something happened right here in the Indus Valley here that just rocked these people, where slowly it just became unlivable. And they're thinking that it's between, earth changes as far as weather patterns, but not only that, maybe some kind of major earthquake that happened around there at the time. And this is not far from Mohenjo-Daro, where you find people still dead in the streets with radiation on their bones, no telling what it was. But most likely that would be either some kind of technology. But say you don't believe in that kind of stuff, you scratch that idea. It's not impossible for a object from out of this solar system to come in that's something like 3i Atlas, or something else that may be radiological, and have a big burst over where people live, because you could tell the city wasn't destroyed. However, they all died and they all moved, and then you find vitrified stone and other indications that something miraculous or big happened. But it's not unlikely that one object or another might be carrying some kind of heavy radiological thing, like uranium or something even worse than that, maybe on the periodic table we don't know about yet, something unstable that would come in and just eradicate an entire area, and then everybody left forever. And then you think about, how does that kind of fit into today's life? What signs would they have been seeing when they lived there? I think they might have been seeing stuff like manufacturing shrink, jobs disappearing, people leaving, things like that, things that are not unfamiliar to us today in a technological world. Or maybe, massive layoffs, millions of people with nothing to do. And what do? They do what we just said a minute ago, where it's becoming obvious that people of ancient times, at various different cataclysmic events, just got up and they moved. I mean, imagine all the people that left Vesuvius or other places like that because they were like, you know what, that's too scary, I'm leaving, we're taking our family, we're gone. And then their next door neighbors are like, I've been here since my great grandparents, nothing gonna happen, that thing never does nothing. And then boom, one day it's changed. And what would be the signs after that, or before it even, if it was something that you could predict, as we might be able to do today in technological sense, knowing that we're kind of set for something natural to happen to the earth.
Yeah, and I would go on with that and say the amount of volcanoes that are waking up currently is well, it's astounding. We had that Afar region just over there in Ethiopia that hadn't erupted in 10,000 years to 12,000 years. They're not even sure. It's a 10 to 12,000 year range of eruption. That's a damn big 2,000 year gap. Are you telling me that you can't precisely tell when that volcano erupted, that there's a 2,000 year possibility of error on that? That's 20% of error. Like, that's ridiculous that we have all these sciences that we can't even know. But this Purase volcano had just awakened, and that last eruption was 1977. So at least in terms of what we're seeing with extreme cold ready to rip into the planet right now, 1977 is that same Buffalo blizzard. We're experiencing some of the same things. I mean, I should jump into the winter forecast here.
It says right
Volcanoes
there.
going off that hadn't been seen since the 1970s. So if you would allow me to just for this last minute or so here to jump in and share my tabs. What we're looking at is a super freeze event. So this was today
Wow.
and yesterday. 43 degrees Fahrenheit below normal on the average temperatures here. And if you're looking at the coldest place on the planet currently is where you see in the United States over Minnesota and parts of Iowa, leading over into Indiana there. 40 degrees Fahrenheit below normal temperatures. Well, meanwhile, the Arctic continues to have sudden stratospheric warming event after sudden stratospheric warming event. It seems that what you were talking about earlier, that there's a new magnetic field line that's energized enough to make that reconnection into a new point on the North Pole. That is, anytime we have something from the sun strong enough to reestablish, but right now we're in a sort of a weak period, it pulls off. The cold can lump back up there, and every time we have some sort of event from the sun, it punches back and knocks the cold away. So this is what seems to be a reoccurring pattern right now. And then if you look out on December 16th, that blue right there, coming all the way down through Texas into Louisiana, all the way down into the Gulf Coast again, this is going to be record cold temperatures beyond what was last year's record cold temperatures. And with that Gulf moisture, are we going to see set up of feet of snow on the Gulf Coast beaches again? This is what it seems to be shaping up as here, coming on in the middle of the month. Now, as we come into the 2nd to the 8th, now as we go to next week, what we're looking at below, sub-zero temperatures is anywhere in that light pink. Now, the demand for natural gas and electricity, and then we have these data centers, and we're getting into record cold that we haven't seen since the 1970s, snowfall, etc. Data centers versus people heating their homes, this is where the ultimate battle occurs this year. This is going to be an established, reoccurring pattern once again. And if we look at the I'm wondering, where all these billionaires, I had this one set up for us. Billionaires are buying land in certain locations across the US. And you just have to wonder, do they know something about, I'm not saying it's going to go to this, level of destruction, but in terms of some sort of earth change that people are preparing for, governments, billionaires, etc., they seem to have mapped it out pretty good on the cycle duration, the onset, the intensification, the apex of earth changes. So where does this leave us then? Is more the question. Because people are preparing for something. Not sure exactly what it is. But this year, it seems that, as Ransom rightly pointed out, when those magnetic field lines in that traditional map where you see the looping currents coming in off the Earth's magnetic field, one of those is punched in over the North Pole and has reestablished itself occasionally as the new punch through point on either M-class or X-class flares that it re-energizes enough to punch in and hold that state. And we're getting continuous knockoff of the Arctic cold across lower latitudes. So every time we get a solar event, a CME coming in, we're going to get the reestablishment of that sudden stratospheric warming event, is the way they're terming it. I'm saying it's a new electrified, established magnetic field line that is in the wrong place. It's off kilter, for a better term, and it's disturbing the entire flow of the Arctic air mass during our winter months. That's what we're dealing with. So be governments and try to deal with that. It's actually here now. And how do we deal with it? Because there's going to be most of the Arctic this winter, when it reestablishes the cold and we get a solar event, boom, it's going to knock down again. And we're going to get continuous flows of Arctic air, and especially when it comes into January and February, and we get into 40 degrees Fahrenheit below normal temperatures in the middle of January, that's a very scary world to live in. And then if it does continue to spill out into April and May, and we get, X-class flares coming in May, and boom, we get another one of those knockouts during the planting season, then where does that take us? It takes us into that food. And why do they want you on the digital ID? Because of a digital rationing card, they can ration food along with the digital ID to see who gets what. I mean, it seems all a lot tied in right now, and especially the Economist magazine cover of the year ahead 2026 shows a round perturbation of something in that same area where this magnetic field line established itself and keeps knocking the cold down with this high pressure system that rides on top of that. So anyway, I appreciate you watching tonight. Ransom, thank you for joining and throwing your ideas in. buymeacoffee.com/civilization cycle. If you like this type of content, scan that QR code right there. Head over to civilizationcycle.com, put your email in, grab the show notes of things we talked about tonight. If it was too fast and furious for you, awesome, because you can just get the show notes and we'll be happy to get the talking points. So you can share with friends and family, see what other people are thinking. How do we come up with solutions? But please support us in this broadcast. Our sponsors tonight, VNI.life. Those links are in the description box below. Alpha Vedic, as well as Hemp Lucid with Chase over there. And buymeacoffee.com/civilization cycle. So I appreciate you staying with us through these 2 hours. I know we go through a lot of, we try to stay away from politics because everybody's saturating the politics. We wanted to go on something that's a little different, so you can see the layers of the onion here that are, well, in play at the moment on our earth and our world. Ransom, take us out. Any closing comments?
Brr.
Burr, yeah. Brr. Oh, you and the raccoon
Brr.
holding on. My pet raccoon. We'll see you next week.
Right. That's why that raccoon was trying to get drunk, to stay warm.
Stay warm with the schnapps. I
Right.
brewed up some pear, by the way. This is my latest pear schnapps brew that we did last week. Pears that I grew in my back field, by the way. So we had about 200 pounds of pears this year. So I was able to get that with some Lavalan 1118 and take that with, that was a 1 pound of pear. I kind of hit it heavy on the sugar this time. It was 1 pound of pear, 2 pounds of sugar, 1 gallon of spring water with the Lavalan 1118, and I just let it go for a couple weeks. Had a reptilian heater under there to make sure it stayed at the optimum temperature. We distilled that down. We kept part of it with some champagne yeast to see what our pear champagne comes out like, but I'm not sure exactly. It's not ready yet. But if you're wondering what I was sipping on, this is from my own place, distilled by myself with my own fruits off my own land. The only thing I used was the yeast that I bought from somewhere else. The spring water came from our earth, local. The pears from my property, the copper from the earth, but we distilled that out. So anyway, you can do it too. And by the way, the byproduct came off at about 180 to 185 proof. So we were able to light that on fire. It came up almost pure blue flame. There was just a little tinge of yellow at the top, which meant that it was above 180. So there's some motor fuels in there too, the ethanols. Hey,
Nice.
So I'm trying to get a guy that has this old, it's got a 1928 crank dual fuel motor off of, and I'm trying to get him, once I get 5 gallons of my super octane, to try to come in. We're going to do a video and try to pour that in and see if we can't get the auto started off with something that was brewed on the property as motor fuels from a 1928 vehicle. So that's in the future for you. We'll keep you
Rocket fuel.
apprised of that. Yeah.
Rocket fuel. All right.
The
Peace out.
Shine Mobile. Anyway, bye for now.